Welcome to the Wheel of Time podcast. We're the Lorehounds, your guides to Randland. I'm David.
I'm John, and this is our coverage of the Amazon Prime original series, The Wheel of Time.
In this podcast, we're going to re-release our 2022 interview with Dr. Michael Livingston, author of Origins of the Wheel of Time, a book that breaks down the roots of Robert Jordan's massive fantasy world.
Be sure to stick around to the end of the podcast for programming notes about our podcasting schedule for the rest of August and September, and of course, our coverage plans for the Wheel of Time.
For early and ad-free access and exclusive content to all of our podcasts, visit us at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Also, if you're enjoying our content and want to give us a little leg up, leave us a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts. Ratings and reviews really help people find our podcasts, even in the Aiel waste section.
You got it.
I got it. Okay. I was really nervous. I don't want to get the hate mail of mispronouncing the beloved titles of Robert Jordan. I want to be respectful.
Watch them completely change it for the show.
Right.
Watch them completely change it. We love to respond to your questions, thoughts, and theories on air, so send us feedback for the next episode.
Send emails to wot@thelorehounds.com or head over to our website and either use the voicemail feature or the contact form. You can also post a message in our Discord server, and we can include those as well. Links to all of that in the show notes. John, Wheel of Time. Season 1 is done. Season 2 is just about to start. We are gearing up for our coverage. So maybe before we talk about this re-release of this interview, do you want to just run through our coverage plans really fast?
Yeah, this was the second show we agreed to cover.
Right, we've been waiting for this.
We have covered like 10 shows since then. Yeah. Yeah, and so we're really excited for it, I think. I am, at least.
Yeah, I am too.
And we've got screeners for the first half of the season, which is very exciting, and will allow us to put our episodes out on Friday, the day it airs. And I'm excited for it. So we're going to have weekly recaps, reviews, all that. Patrons are going to get it a few hours earlier because I got to space it out with Foundation, which is also coming out on Fridays.
Right. And Ahsoka is coming in, so we're in a bumper crop right now.
Yeah, I had to do some wizardry with the schedule over there because it's getting to be a crazy fall. But I'm really excited to do this. We're going to do our spoiler-free review, of course, as we usually do. We're not going to spoil anything from the books. We're not going to obviously spoil anything from future screeners because we would get in trouble. And we will also have a segment with Elysia, you may know from our other podcast and from her podcast, Will Shift Dust. She's going to come on. She's going to talk to me about the books, which we both read. And we're going to call that the White Tower segment. That's going to be at the end of the podcast. David's going to hop off. You're going to get many warnings that the book spoilers are coming. And then
so come with me if you want to live, if you don't want to be spoiled.
There you go.
Yeah. Cool. And I think what we're going to do individual episodes for the first 3 podcasts because they're doing a 3-episode.
They are.
3-episode drop.
Yeah.
So there'll be one each for that. And then at the end of the third one, we'll have our first White Tower segment.
Correct. Yeah.
With Elysia. And you and Elysia we already had it sort of a preview. So this is the second podcast in the sequence so far. So the next one coming will be 1. We'll have 2 and 3. And then we'll, at the end of the season, we'll do one more about it. We'll drop it about a week after the season is over. That way we'll have time to collect your feedback and your thoughts for what you thought of season 2 overall and how things are going. So be sure to send us emails or jump on the Discord server so that we can collect all that feedback for the end of the season. And Elysia is going to join us for that whole of that episode too.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're having some great conversations already, and I'm really excited to talk about this season. So before that, though, y'all need some background. And to get that background, we brought in Professor Dr. Michael Livingston, who had a really great conversation with us. This was back in December 2022. We didn't know when season 2 was coming. We didn't know fully what it was going to cover. So we're going to be missing some information.
His book had just come out at the same time, right?
It's a really great read, and I hope that people pick it up from this because I'll let him tell you in the interview, but he really goes into the Arthurian roots of the Wheel of Time and how it differs from Tolkien, how it's similar to Tolkien. It's really a great conversation. He's a big proponent of academic studies of fantasy, and that was an inspiring thing to read in his book and to talk to him about. So I hope everyone sticks around for the conversation. And either way, hope that we see you this season on the Wheel of Time.
And at the end of the podcast, we'll have updates on our scheduling. Or Marker, that should we just do we even do any of that tail outro stuff, or
let's
do a normal outro?
Yeah, let's record a normal outro quickly after this.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, Marker back in.
Yep.
Yeah, and stick around to the end of the podcast. We'll talk about some of our coverage plans, the plans that are, stuff that's happening with our affiliates. Properly Howard is jumping into their season. Elysia's got stuff going on in June. We've got a lot of things happening. Stick around to the end of the podcast, and we'll talk about all those things that are going on. And as usual, do thank all of our patrons.
Okay, with us today is Dr. Michael Livingston of the Citadel, author of Origins of the Wheel of Time. Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. I just read your book this week. It was excellent, and I'm really excited to dig into this with you.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Wheel of Time. I had to convince David to cover the series with me. We generally cover TV over here, but I'm a big fan of the Wheel of Time books. Of course, season 1 was a little shaky compared to the books, which I think are great all the way through. So we're excited for season 2, and in the interim, before season 2 starts, we're digging a little deeper into the books here, and so we wanted to hear all about your new book. It came out November 8th, and it's available now wherever you get your books, and we'll drop a link to Michael's website in the description. So, Michael, if you could tell us, what was your inspiration behind Origins?
So great question. This is a book that is, I like to kind of say, outworld focus as opposed to inworld focus. So one of the great things about the Wheel of Time is its depth, right? Its complexity, the depth of the cultures, the histories that he's built, the amazing family trees, all this stuff. It's so expansive and kind of realized, which makes sense. It's like 4.4 million words or whatever it is. It's a lot. And
right.
And so it has this amazing kind of in-world quality. And we've had great resources for that. The Wheel of Time Companion, for instance, the World of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, called The White Book, that sort of detail that material. But one of the things that's interesting about Jordan is the way that he used our world to create that. And this is something that I've always gravitated towards. I'm a historian and a literary specialist of the medieval world. Cut my teeth on Tolkien, and this is something Tolkien did, kind of looking backwards, and has been kind of really, really kind of shaped Tolkien studies. Is this idea of how he's using the past, and I've written on that and gone to the Tolkien archives and all that. And Jordan's doing the same kind of thing, and nobody was talking about it in a sort of gathered up kind of academic, let's really show this to people. There are websites, there's some amazing websites that have talked about this, and I've done lectures over the years, but never had kind of been pulled all together into one sort of public facing. Here's what he was doing. So I was kind of picked to do this, and it was amazing thing to do.
Yeah, you mentioned you were picked to do this. I know the Team Jordan was very involved. They hand selected you to dig into this work. How was it working with Harriet McDougall?
An absolute honor. I mean, Harriet is one of the greatest science.
Sorry, who is Harriet?
Harriet is the widow of Robert Jordan. Was actually first his editor. Right. And one of the greatest science fiction and fantasy editors kind of all time. I mean, she edited Ender's Game, among a plethora of amazing works. And getting to work with her was amazing.
So was she an editor in her own right before she married Jordan?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
She was his editor, and then
they got married.
Wow,
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So she's the kind of founding editor of Tor books, and that's how they sort of got to know each other. And I go through the entire kind of. It's a beautiful love story of the two of them, and I go through that in my biography of Jordan that kind of starts the book. because it is so integral then to the creation of the Wheel of Time, is kind of Harriet's sort of force behind this. And I wanted to highlight that for people. And so, yeah, the opportunity to work with her, to get edits from her, that was crazy, right? To get like her hand edits on pages. I'm like, my God, she edited Ender's Game, like, and she's editing my stuff. Like, what is going on? And
did you get all fanboy?
Yeah, I was totally fanboy. I fanboyed constantly in the making of this. I mean, to be given full access to all the notes, all like everything that he had touched, and everyone, right? Do you want to talk to Tom Doherty of Tor Books? Yeah, here you go. Do you want to talk to Brandon Sanderson? Here you go. You want to talk to, like, it was just, and here's the call list. Who do you want to talk to? What do you want to see? And then to have the kind of the track of Harriet and Team Jordan, his assistants, all to be able to say, yeah, we think this is correct. Like, yeah, this is right. To help me feel like, I'm not in kind of off on my own here, right? I've got all this authorization essentially behind me. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's fascinating because it seems like they sort of handed you the Christopher Tolkien keys, whereas Christopher was, given full access to his father's work after his passing and was able to do whatever he wanted with it. It seems like you've sort of gotten to take up that mantle a little bit with Jordan.
Yeah, and that was very much kind of like the model. Again, as an academic, I mean, I've published a lot on Tolkien and have some choice thoughts for Christopher, but the
911.
You can give us your hot takes here. I mean, where our mics are open.
Yeah. Anyway, don't speak ill of the past. Yeah, it was kind of like that.
I would say that there's a place for valid critique and criticism, as opposed to throwing fire and feces just for the sake of throwing fire and feces. So
yeah, and I would never want to do that. I mean, I've having worked in the Tolkien archives and had to try and negotiate things and stuff. There's like sensitivity. You went left, you should have gone right, and you went left for what I consider invalid reasons. But
interesting.
But yeah, it was that kind of full access, and the book, I've got thousands of words, unpublished words of Jordan that, they're what a key difference that is, with working in the Tolkien archives. I have to sign all kinds of NDAs about what I've seen there. And then to try and presenting that stuff for an academic audience, for a public audience, right? Like, here's this piece of information that would be really useful. Am I allowed to do that? Right. And then it goes to what used to go to Christopher, and they're like, nope, can't ever tell a soul. Like, no, you don't get to tell anybody. Okay. Right. As opposed to here, and you're like, this is a sentence. Like, I want to quote a sentence out of a letter. Like, are you kidding? Why are you withholding this? It makes no sense. Like,
right.
People want to know who that character really is. And there's the smoking gun. And in this case, it was the complete opposite, where I would say, can I quote this? Like, in one case, I give, like, I don't know how many words in a row it is, right? But like a first draft of one of the chapters of the first book, a huge chunk of it. And when I asked permission for that, I thought, oh, there's no way they're going to let me give this whole chunk, right? But I'll ask for the big chunk on the assumption that they'll be like, all right, we'll compromise here. Instead, they're like, yeah, go ahead and do the whole chunk. Oh, okay. This is phenomenal. So the level of access and the freedom to, I guess, to kind of say what I felt needed to be said without there being somebody kind of watching over and saying, well, we don't want you to say that because we feel like that's going to make, the estate look bad or whatever. I mean, not that I don't think there was anything like that, but it just never came. And that was such a wonderful experience as a researcher and a writer, to feel like I was completely unfettered, that all I was getting was support. And if there was a correction or whatever, it was because it was a correction, right? As opposed to a, no, like we're not going to allow that. It was like, no, here's this other piece of information, which is exactly what you would want in a case like this. So yeah, it was amazing.
That's really great to hear. I mean, you can tell when you read it how open Harriet and the rest of Team Jordan were with the works and how useful they were as a boon rather than a blockade. And that's really great to see. When I opened your book, I expected to find a lot of details, a lot of trivia that would be helpful to my reading of the Wheel of Time, to my coverage of the Wheel of Time. What I didn't expect to find was possibly the best defense of fantasy as an academic study that I've ever read. So you gave this really excellent defense of this as a field of speculative fiction, if you will, and of fantasy and magic as something that deserves to have its own attention by serious critics. Can you talk more about that?
Happy to. So when I was in graduate school, fantasy was like, that's not serious, right? Like that's not literature, right? Quote unquote, capital L. And that always really ticked me off. And while I was in graduate school, Tolkien studies started kind of like coalescing and being valid for at least kind of like part of the world, right? I mean, there were still people that were like, no, nose in the air kind of thing. But Tolkien studies was kind of happening. And a large part of that due to like Tom Shippey, his amazing work, Road to Middle Earth and Author of the Century. Tom's incredible. And sort of that paving of the way was amazing and great for Tolkien. But even so, I remember at the University of Rochester, I wanted to teach a class for the undergraduates on Tolkien. And there was real resistance, well, that's not real literature, right? I was actually, that's not real literature and nobody would take it anyway. And it's like, they would. And also it's real literature, right? And finally got to teach that class, and it crashed the servers. People trying to roll up for it.
That's
and
awesome.
They hadn't put a cap on the class, so they had thought, well, maybe the class will make with 10, whatever, and ended up being 100 students, like in an auditorium. Like it was just bonkers. Which I was like, I told you, right? And and then when I came to the Citadel, which was Jordan's alma mater.
Is that the Citadel, the military academy in the Carolinas?
Yes, the military college of South Carolina.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and there was kind of a is the Wheel of Time. It was just like Tolkien had been, like 20 years earlier, kind of thing. The same thing, and it really bothered me. And then when Jordan was going to be inducted into the South Carolina Academy of Authors, and he had just died. Fortunately, he knew that he had been awarded this before his death, but the induction had not taken place. And the induction took place on my campus, and I was asked. They said, "Well, can you talk? Because you know his work. You're a professor, and you're a professor here. That'll all look really good. Would you be willing to do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. I mean, you're kidding. I'll talk about him to anybody anywhere. Sure." And then somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, but somebody said, there are some people that aren't really sure. South Carolina Academy of Authors is, sort of has a literary acknowledgement to it, right? And does this really count because it's fantasy? And I don't know if that's true, but I was told that there had been this like, well, he did sell, at that point, 40 million books or whatever. I guess we. So I took that speech as an opportunity to have to make a defense. Like this is 100% literature, right? If you're saying fantasy isn't literature, like you just threw out Homer, you just threw out Beowulf, you just threw out like do you want to know what you just burned down, you idiots? You know, like, and again, I really don't know if there are people in that audience who felt that way, but that's.
Do you think that that's something that's related between antiquity and modernism? Well, it's modern, therefore, it hasn't stood the test of time, whereas Homer is antiquity, and therefore,
I think there's this bizarre separation that happens where yeah, it's allowed to be fantastic if it's back then,
right?
But not now. But it can be fantastic now if you don't call it magic realism, and now it's okay.
Right.
Right. You're like, what? Like, what now? I'm sorry, that's still a fantasy. Like, you've labeled it different. Right. I don't know what's going on. Did you actually read Borges or not? Because it's fantasy. So yeah, I mean, there is something to that, that like, oh, it's okay to talk about monsters if it's ancient or medieval. We don't do that anymore, except we do that still, but in this category. And so now it counts. And then, and I just have no patience for that.
Can I chase for a second this idea too of, okay, fantasy as literature, cool. Science fiction as literature, ... question mark. And then what's the difference between science fiction and fantasy? Are we doing the same things? Or what's the fulcrum or the pivot point between science fiction and fantasy?
I don't see one.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't see one. All these things are ideas of spectrum.
Uh-huh.
Right? I mean, the Heart of Darkness did not happen. Like, on a pretty basic level, it's a fantasy, right? He made that
You're
up.
Talking about Conrad.
Joseph Conrad, right? I mean, he made that up. Like, that's not real.
Right.
Lord of the Flies, not real. Like, made the whole thing up. Like, so just, it's like a spectrum of how much are you making up, right? How much are you making up? Well, now I'm making up the landscape, right? Now I'm making up the technology. Now I'm making up, all right, well, we're just moving that line. It's not really substantially a different thing. Now, there's not to say the categories are not like utilitarian in a functional way, right? It is useful if you really like this kind of thing to have a category for that flavor of it, right?
Classical versus jazz. Like you hear it, that there's a difference there.
Right. And if you're interested in jazz, like go there, right? And you're like, well, I really like jazz fusion. All right, well, okay, that's this category.
Right.
Like, and if you like that, you're probably going to like this. That's utilitarian, right? But it's all music. So, yeah, that one's got a little bit more of this. This one's got a little more of that. All right. And so this like gatekeeping of, well, if you're making up this bit, then it doesn't count. I'm just like, you have no leg to stand on. There's no logic to this. This is just you like leveraging your own biases to try and like make the world you. And I have no patience for that.
Right.
So yeah, I gave that speech in inducting. I mean, not in, like as part of the induction ceremony, and it was well received. Hardest speech I've ever given in my life. I've said this numerous times.
Wow.
Because he had just died. Larry was front row, right in front of the podium. And, I've given speeches to hundreds of people all the time. Like, I'm like, whatever. But man, I was like, I can't look at her because I'll break. Right. Because you could just see all the emotion she was like holding in and stuff. And it was just like, I can't look at her. I won't be able to keep cool. And so I've of course apologized to her numerous times since. Like, I'm so sorry I'm giving that speech. I could not look at you. I was talking to you, but I couldn't look at you because like it was this huge group of people and I couldn't do that. She was like, it's okay. I was crying for both of us. Fair enough. So yeah, I basically took like that speech and the idea of it, and yeah, I incorporated it into the text of this to kind of again like make this okay. Just to say this is an okay thing. Like, you can love this. I mean, I'm like, on the one hand, I'm like, why the hell do you need me to tell you it's okay, right? You shouldn't. But I also know from experience that it does matter to people, right? There is a kind of this professor said that it's okay. And there's a relief to that. And, I would say like you don't need me to tell you something's okay, but if it helps, like, awesome. It's okay. It's good stuff, and be happy with it. Love it. Study it. Like, treat it as Homer, like, go for it. There's no reason not to do that.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm glad that you thought that defense was good. It certainly came from the heart from my side.
No, you could tell reading the book. I was reading the section on, and actually, let's take a step back quickly and talk about the structure of your book, because this was something that I was not sure what it was going to be going in. And what I found was it was sort of half this prose-based background story, a breakdown of Jordan's writing technique. It even has a full chapter on Tolkien and Jordan, which was really excellent and something that comes up a lot because of the similarities between The Eye of the World and The Lord of the Rings.
I have it in my notes right here. Question mark. Tolkien, Jordan, question mark, question mark.
Right. But as you point out, Jordan sort of takes what Tolkien did and went a step farther. And what I want to know is, how did you go about deconstructing Jordan's writing process to the point where you get to these Arthurian legends that you mentioned, and to the point where you can sort of compare and contrast with Tolkien in such detail?
By careful step. This was one of the things that drew me to Jordan in the first place. When I was 15 years old and picked up Eye of the World the first time. And even in the prologue, you get these, the one I always mention to people because I think it's fairly recognizable, as a reference to the gates of Paradisen. And I'm like, at the age of 15, I was like, that's the gates of paradise, isn't it? Like, I feel like he's up to something. And that kind of drew me in because I'm somebody who likes, puzzles. And here's one of the things I love in my being a medieval military historian, right? What happened at the Battle of Agincourt? I mean, that's a puzzle, right? I've got clues, pieces, and then I try and coalesce them into a complete picture. And so that the idea that was something that was happening within these books captivated me. And for years, I've been like sort of doing this in my spare time, as it were, and then giving lectures about kind of what I was seeing at Jordan Con, the convention dedicated to Jordan, at Dragon Con, getting in front of people and, here's what I think he's up to. And obviously seeing, what Shippey and others, had done with Tolkien and, the kind of writing that I was doing with Tolkien, talking about his influences and how he was building things. So I had a lot of that kind of apparatus already in mind and a lot of those pieces of the puzzle. And he had given a lot of interviews as well, where he would say, somebody would write and say, this looks kind of Arthurian. And he'd be like, yeah, sure is. Like,
right.
Well done. And so I already had all that in mind. And that was part of this is what the book is going to be. But then being given full access to the notes, there were notes that were and of course I talk about many of them in the book, that were like, this character equals that character, right? This character equals that character. That's pretty good. A smoking gun. I like that. So you could see in his process how he would do this. And then that allowed me in the second half of the book. First half of the book, as you said, I've got a biography of Jordan, a kind of comparison between him and Tolkien, not a comparison like one is better than the other, but just like a
right
kind of setting them together, right? Mm-hmm. This is Tolkien's methods. Here's how Jordan kind of built on that model. And then I've got a chapter of Jordan's writing process, going through the notes, going through this was the first seed, right? Then he layers in this, then he layers in this. Here's all the drafts and things to walk people through that. And then the second half of the book is a glossary of people, places, items, events that sort of say, this is where he got it. the way the Wheel of Time works, it's rarely just one thing, right?
Right.
Rand al'Thor is doesn't equal King Arthur. Like that's a piece of that puzzle.
Right.
And so I had all that stuff, and to have the notes kind of confirming a lot of that, and then from that kind of like reverse engineer, like this is his process, this is how he did it, and I know he did it here, 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 here. What happens if I put that in place here? Oh, I get this. Well, that's what he did, right? It's really, I guess part of the reason I like the Tolkien comp, or you can find the language behind languages, right? Linguistic methodologies. Some of the Tolkien was fascinated with in philology, and you can do the same thing with stories, and that's of course what Lord of the Rings is. The story behind stories. Jordan's doing the same thing, and so it once you see his method in place, it's pretty easy to start spotting it everywhere. And by no means is this book the totality of this. It is like the tip of the iceberg of this happening, because he does it all over the place.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Now, you mentioned philology. You've described philology in the book in a way that I had not thought of it before, because everyone associates it with language because of who Tolkien was, about the courses he taught, the writings he did outside the Lord of the Rings. And you've sort of expanded it to this love of learning, this broader thing where it includes things like histories and cultures and myth. And then you apply that in a way that makes this glossary make a lot more sense. Because I think if I started with the glossary, it would be useful in giving me trivia, but it would not allow me to fully trace Jordan's mind the way that you have throughout the book. But the way that you've laid out the glossary after this really helps to lead the reader down the path of Jordan's reverse engineering, as you put it.
Yeah, and of course that was very deliberate. Mm-hmm. I know that many people are going to come to the book and are going to go straight to the glossary for particular things, right?
Right.
I mean, I know many people are like, first thing I'm doing is finding out who Nakomi is. I'm going to that entry, right? And that's fine. Like, that's live and let live. You ain't hurting anybody, baby. Go for it.
Right.
That said, I wrote it to be read like beginning to end, because I do think it's important to establish who he is and how he worked, and to establish this mindset of yes, stories, applying linguistic principles to story, which is something Tolkien did, right? I mean, philology means love of learning. That's literally what the word means. And it got sort of transposed, into linguistics, because that's where it starts with, Sanskrit and the commonalities with Greek and Latin, back in the day. But certainly Tolkien is trying to view this in story terms. And Jordan is just like, yeah, man, going to go down that rabbit hole, and then adds into it, other writers like Robert Graves, White Goddess, and what he's doing, which is again kind of similar. So, ideally, from my point of view, a reading of the book in which you get through those first chapters. Hopefully, it's not through like it was a homework to do, but like you do those before you get into the glossary. Yeah, the glossary will make more sense, because now you can see this is how he did it, and I'm just giving you like the final result of that for each entry, right? I don't trace the entire process in that entry. The book would be too bloody big. But to say like these connect, and why, because what the process is, right? So yeah, it certainly is kind of meant to read that way, but I mean, if anybody's listening and wants to do it elsewise, it's fine.
No, I definitely agree with you. It makes more sense going front to back. And it's very interesting, because it does feel like sort of two volumes of a book there. where another author might have split this into 2 books, but they pair so well together that I'm glad that you put this together here.
So my question, and as our listeners know, I'm an uninitiated in the world of Jordan other than seeing season 1 on Amazon. It sounds like I could read the first part of the book to understand who Jordan was as an author and sort of these wider contexts. And then I could use the second half, the glossary part, as I'm watching so that I can deconstruct certain elements. And I'm asking as a specific use case as somebody who has not seen anything but season 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a little bit hard for me to tell because I know it all, right? But
yeah,
I don't want to know it all like I'm a know it all. But
you wrote the book, right? Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But I think the first. I mean, one of the first things I say is, look, this is full spoilers, because you can't really do this without talking about the entirety of the scope of things, right? So, yeah, just for as an example, and I'm not going to spoil it here or whatever, but even if you're just watching the first season of the show, that there's a thing called the last battle that people are worried about. Like I talk about in the entries of the glossary, I talk about the last battle and how that was constructed and the historical stuff that's used. So in that sense, there's spoilers, obviously.
Okay.
But the prose chapters, the first half of the book, there are spoilers in there in certain elements of talking about the drafts, right? he originally planned for the series to kind of come together this way. That's not what happened, but that's kind of what he originally planned. I did try to keep that from being too spoilerific. So I do think you could basically do that, right? You could read the first few chapters and get a really good sense of what the Wheel of Time is about, what it is that Jordan was trying to do, how he was doing it, that could then inform what you're seeing on the screen. I mean, that's not to say that the Rafe Judkins and everybody else who was involved in that knew this stuff. I've got no idea. They never talked to me, so I don't know.
Well, they should.
As far as I know, they've never accessed the notes or any of that stuff.
Boop, 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 boop. Hey, Jeff. Yeah, get over. Have those guys talk to Michael.
Yeah, but it's still they're informed by the books, and the books are informed by all this. I mean, I still think kind of the pieces are there, and it would be useful, I think, to hopefully I've done my work in explaining to people, even if they kind of didn't come in with a love of the Wheel of Time, why people find this amazing and what it is that Jordan was trying to do that has captivated people.
So would you say that then when the discussions about the production for this book, was that the brief that you were brought, or I don't know how the conversation is exactly flowed, but what's the purpose of this book, or what was the brief? What was the need in the marketplace for this book to be called for?
I think the big one was that nobody had kind of really laid out this kind of additional track. So I almost think about it as the Wheel of Time is a series. It's not alone in this, but it's, to the depth that it is pretty unique, where you have kind of one surface story, and that surface story is fine. It's complete. It's totally great. But then you can separate out another track, another read of it, another understanding of it that is also complete. And those two tracks are working simultaneously. It's like left and right channel. They come together into this amazing stereo. But they can be sort of tracked out, and for the most part, everybody's listening to one track. And it's a great track. It's an amazing track. There's a reason this is sold. Yeah, I mean, 40 million copies or whatever the hell it's up to now. There's a reason. But hey, as much as you love this, I'm not saying you've been loving it wrong. I'm not saying that what you're doing is.
But check it out. Underneath here, there's another track going on. Yeah,
check this out. Isn't that cool?
It's something. It's not like it's missing. I think this is a very bizarre analogy, but like airplane wings have been working for a very, very long time, right? And then suddenly you started seeing those little wingtips on the airplanes, on the big jumbo jets. And I was like, oh, this improves the wing. The wing is fine, but this like adds this whole other thing of efficiency and safety and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
So it's
flies
like
either way. It flies
exactly.
either way. But
exactly.
Isn't this nice that we have this?
This is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, same kind of thing, right? You know, cool. Again, and I'm not saying, I mean, you can ignore this crap. It's fine. I mean, I'd love it if you didn't, because I'd like for you to buy my book. But there's no right or wrong way to fan. Like, you can love The Wheel of Time, completely ignore this. Great. Like, fine. But I felt like, you know, when I was giving talks about Jordan and talking about this kind of a little bit, there was always this like, oh my God, you're kidding. Like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's, you know, of course, initially I kind of felt like, isn't this how we all are reading it? No? Like, oh, wow. Like, let me share this. And so, yeah, it was definitely what I wanted to get across in the book was this, like, a love of this thing. Some people have called it like a love letter to the fans. And in some, like it is in my heart, I'm like writing this for y'all. But yeah, I'm trying to sort of hopefully help people understand how awesome The Wheel of Time is. Not to put too fine a point on it, but you know, like, this is amazing stuff. I hope y'all can see that.
Well, you know, if you find yourself listening to a podcast called the Lorehounds podcast, you probably do want that second layer. So I hope that you will check out Michael's book here, because this is probably your target audience.
Yeah, well, hopefully. And it is, you know, the people that kind of like love Tolkien and love it for this kind of this depth and these connective tissues that he makes on, which certainly is me. You know, there's a reason that I've written those articles, you know, about Tolkien and things, is because I'm fascinated by that. And yeah, this sort of say like Jordan was doing that too, right? And in a way that was respectful, I think, of Tolkien. He's using Tolkien. Isn't trying to hide that, right? You know, I mean, there are some authors, I'll throw anybody on the bus, but like copied Tolkien and then like denied it, right?
Right.
No, I didn't.
Martin.
You know, I mean, of course, there's people that have copied Jordan and then have denied it.
Right.
You know, no, I didn't copy that. Sure you didn't. But yeah, here where he's well aware, and you know, the first part of The Eye of the World is straight up Tolkien, right? And intentionally. And it's like so intentionally. He's like, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to turn you.
When John convinced me to check out Wheel of Time on Amazon, I watched that first episode, and I was just like, oh my God, this is so Tolkien, right? Like, it was just screaming at me, but I had no context that that's what he was doing. That there was some of that spirit imbued into the book, you know, overtly into the books, but then, you know, distilled into the first episode. You couldn't probably avoid that. So, and then once I got that, then I was like, okay, settle down. It's okay. Like, you know, this guy's doing something, hang with it and see what it brings you.
Yeah. And it's a difficult thing he tried to do, you know, where he thought, let me give you something that's comfortable, something you're used to. You know, we know kind of Tolkien, you know, works. We know we all love it. You know, he loved it. Let me give you that comfort and familiarity. And now let me start like taking you to left field, you know, like it's okay. It's going to be okay.
Which is what John kept selling me on this series is like, no, wait, just see where he goes with this, because you are not going to know where you end up from where you started necessarily.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I talk about this in the book too. So hopefully that comes across.
Yeah. I mean, when you're reading The Wheel of Time, you can be in book 13, you can be in book halfway through book 14 and you don't know how it's going to end. So he keeps you on your toes the whole time. One thing I'll say is kind of funny is, you know, Tolkien is known as, at least his original intent was to create this mythology of England. And yet Jordan is the one pulling so much from Arthurian legend. And Tolkien was over with like Kalervo and Beowulf, which it's just so funny how Jordan was sort of more on the English side. Although you point out he's got all this stuff from Eastern religions. He's got things from all across the world, which is, I think, something that Tolkien was limited by his very strict adherence to Catholicism in the myths that he pulled from. I think he was comfortable pulling from a lot of myths, but maybe not all, especially those that are tied to religion, modern religion at least. And it's really fascinating to see something like Jordan, where you have this cyclical nature of time. You have this thing that is far removed from the true creation to Armageddon arc that Tolkien was painting. And for you to explore that was really great.
Thank you. It is part of the fun of it. That at any given point, this could be, taking some of the battles, for instance, right? Is his source battle for this something in Vietnam, where he was?
Right.
Is it Alexander the Great? Is it Napoleon? Is it because he did all of them? I mean, he did all those things. And so at any given moment, you really have to be on your toes. And it was great fun for somebody like me, that my puzzle is not confined, as you said with Tolkien. You have a fairly limited range of materials that he's grabbing from. Right. Not said it's not an impressive range, because it's extraordinary.
Right.
But this is just that, and then so much. It's everything. Anything and everything could be in there, and that's daunting, because it is very, where have I not looked? and you're like, there's always somewhere else you could look. His library, the last time they did a count of his library, and this was several years before, so he bought lots of books since. It was 15,000 volumes.
Wow.
He had a lot of stuff. And he was going through it. So yeah, there's a lot that he used, and that's fun. It's cool.
And speaking of stuff, you talk about the physical objects that he had, that he was sort of looking at while he was writing. Can you just give a brief talk about that? And of course, people should get the book if they want to hear the whole story.
By the book. He would apply the same kind of idea of objects or of kind of stories behind stories or whatever. He would apply that to material culture as well. So the example I give, for instance, of the sword, right? The idea there is that you take this sort of, major sword type of East and West, using those in scare quotes because there is no East and West. We're on a globe. But people can typically think of it. So you got like a katana on one side, and like a hand and a half sword. I use an example of the sword of the Black Prince, mainly because it's a fairly famous sword, and I happen to have a replica of it, so made taking pictures easy. To take those two, and he essentially melds them into a single sword to essentially kind of create a sword that these swords could have come from, right? Or alternatively lead to, right? Because right. Being a wheel forecast. That usage of material culture is different. Like Tolkien never really did anything like that. And Jordan's doing that, and even doing that with landscapes. The world itself has that connective tissue. Which again I think is something a lot of people don't really necessarily think about, right? This really is our world. So how does that actually connect? We have the same thing in Tolkien, right? Middle Earth is our Earth. And so, what do you do with that? How do you map it? He's going to the classics there. Why is he going to the classics? He's going to this one. This is why it's tracking out. This is why that maps on the geography. That's cool. Jordan was doing the same stuff. Yeah. And again, I don't think a lot of people are kind of listening to that subtrack, or however you want to say that. So yeah, he was doing this same process essentially with anything and everything. He just really wanted to get this sense of depth by connecting to our world, and it's fun, right? It's cool to have a character looking in a museum and seeing, the symbol of a luxury car, a hood ornament, and being like, man, that's gaudy. Like, what the hell is that piece of metal about? Man, I can sense the kind of superiority on that, just from across the room, and I don't even know what it is, right? And we're reading it and being like, oh yeah, man, I hate people who drive that car too, And of course, then it's also interesting then to find out, Jordan's neighbor drove that car. So,
wow,
shots fired, cool. Yeah, which is another kind of thing I tried to give people a flavor of. That he put things in like Easter eggs, and also just you could almost just kind of see the amusement, right? Of hey, here's this. I wonder who's going to catch it. Like, I wonder who's going to see it. So yeah, fun stuff.
And you point out that sort of makes it skirt the line between science fiction and fantasy when he starts putting Easter eggs in.
I mean, it's in the end, it's in neither category because it's in both categories. Right? What category do you want it to be in? Obviously, it's marketed as fantasy.
Right.
People are like, well, there's magic. It must be fantasy. Okay.
Star Wars.
Right.
And you have Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what are you going to do? So, I mean, those are essentially marketing decisions, and marketing decisions have nothing to do with the work, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Couple of segue questions here, and back into TV realm. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on season 1, and then I really want to ask if you've been watching Andor, but you don't have to answer that second one.
I have been watching Andor, and it's really good. Yeah, it's really good, which is I'll say a relief given some of what has transpired with that property.
Right.
I watched season 1 of Wheel of Time. There were a lot of things I absolutely loved about it. I love that it's bringing people to the books, to this world. I think it's great for people to be aware of this property and hopefully be moved to read the books, because I think the books are amazing.
Right.
But even if not, like, even if you're just like, I'm just a TV fan of the thing. Like, great. Again, like, do your fandom how you want to do it. Like, rock and roll. So I think it's wonderful in that regard. The casting is marvelous. I'm really, really pleased with the casting. I think they did a fantastic job. And like, top to bottom, like, even things where I was like, that's, that doesn't match my headcanon since I was 15. Like, who gives a damn? Like, whatever. Did they do a good job? Yeah, they did a good job. Great. That's awesome. And Rosamund Pike as Moraine, like, she kills it. I think she's so good. And I'd be saying that even if on the audiobook of Origins she doesn't like say nice things about me.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, she does an interview at the end of your audiobook, right?
Yeah, she does an interview at the end of the audiobook and says my name, and like, it's legit to have Rosamund Pike say your name. I'll just say that. It's good. It's good. It's nice. Let's just listen to that on loop. So yeah, the casting's great. I wish that the money that was behind Rings of Power was behind Wheel of Time.
Yeah,
because
right.
I think one of those properties is a lot stronger in terms of the writing and much else. But I think it would have been a good idea, but Jeff Bezos did not ask me. So yeah, I mean, I think it was really good.
One of the things that we did on our during our Rings of Power coverage and a little bit before too was, we talked about Tom Shippey and something, we're sort of roughly calling the Shippey test, which is the whole, does the medium change the message? That whole dialogue between, are the changes that showrunners and directors have to do they keep you in the storyline? And because of the medium, did you have to make certain concessions and changes? And, does that keep you within the core of the message or take you out of the core of the message? I think there was a famous lecture that Tom gave, Tom, listen to me, Professor Shippey, or whatever his official title is, gave that I listened to like over and over again. It was a really great analysis of that question of like, okay, well, here we have the first 3 Lord of the Ring movies. They had to do a lot of script changes and character changes to overlay things to make it work for a movie. And so we used that sort of test throughout the Rings of Power to see, like, rather than just go, oh, I hated this, or, oh, that was really good. Like, no, let's actually rationalize this and use a little bit of a framework here and apply some analysis as opposed to just emotional reaction. So if you think of season 1 of Wheel of Time, end result, do you feel that Amazon kept the core, or did the changes that they had to do for television bend it and shape it so that we're deviating further away from
the changes I thought that they did make? I thought were by and large absolutely understandable. Okay. There were some where I was like, that's not, I would have solved that problem. But I absolutely recognize the problem that you're solving, right? That you recognize, okay, this is the problem, we got to solve it. They chose to do it one way. I think that I would have gone another way, but I get entirely what the problem is, and yours is a solution, right? So fine. There wasn't anything that kicked me out in that way. It felt a lot like the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, right? Is like they cut Tom Bombadil. Yeah, so would I, right? I mean, right. In terms of what Tolkien's doing, is Tom Bombadil important? Oh my God, yes. Tom Bombadil is absolutely essential. But it's the first cut. It's first cut I'm making, and
Council of Elrond, right? Like, let's bring that down, right.
Right. I mean, and the second cut I'm making is probably the most important thing in the books in Lord of the Rings to me. The most important thing in those books really is probably the Scouring the Shire. Cut number 2. Sucks, but that's what we got to do to kind of make this work as a film. So yeah, I thought that this was absolutely the kind of equivalent of that, in terms of, we're going to have to cut this. We're going to have to bring these things together. We're going to have to add this subplot to establish these things that, we slow burned in the books, and we can't slow burn it. Right. And we got to do this. Great. I didn't have any problem with any of that. I was really, really pleased with all that. When I've, about the only thing that I was like, oh, dang it, is the same thing I'm always mad with in almost any of these films or TV shows, whatever, which is the military stuff, right? And that's I'm a medieval military historian. Of course I'm going to be pissed if you got the trebuchet pointed the wrong way. Or if you're Game of Thrones, did you just literally throw away your light infantry? Did you just do that? What? Does anybody? I get that you want drama. I can give you drama, damn it! And do it correctly. Right. Come on. So yeah, there's that kind of stuff, where you're like, that's not at all right. And why did you do that? But I'm also like, that's Hollywood. I mean, that's Hollywood, baby. That's how they always are. They don't get it right.
Interestingly, when I was, trying to watch that first season, when I really started to get strong feels and go, oh wow, I'm really starting to invest in these characters, was apparently a whole cloth created subplot about the death of the warder and the Aes Sedai and that relationship. Yeah. And that blew me away. I was like, whoa, this is new. I have not seen this before. And that was, educated me, was that is all show creation as opposed to.
And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And again, that's the sort of thing where, the connection between the Aes Sedai and the warders is slow burned in the books. You kind of get pieces of it, and you come to a full understanding of it. And they're like, no, man, you need to understand this. Let's create a subplot that does that. And God, it's good. It's so good.
So good.
It's probably my favorite episode of the entire series.
It does stuff with gender and grief and ritual. Yeah. It was just beautiful.
If there was one sort of piece of the whole thing, and I don't know who it was in the writers' room who kind of came up with that, but like that would have been the thing that I'd just be like, just high five, like just this is amazing, like nailed it, love it, you know.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a kind of purist or whatever that you know, well, that's not in the book, so it doesn't belong. Like you know, take a hike, you know, like this is it's what it needs to be. I mean, I say it as a purist, and then I am like, you know, the trebuchet should face the right way. I mean, I guess I'm a purist about some things.
Well, that's
not
okay.
A wheel of time.
Well, again,
that's not a wheel of time error.
Outside of pointing the weapon in the right direction to do its job, that's really where I like to bring in this whole sort of shippy test thing, which is like, okay, I can have an emotional reaction to this. I can like it or dislike it. But I can understand that the showrunner has a studio on their back, who has finances on their back, where they have production schedules, actor schedules. We had COVID throwing a huge wrench into the works for a whole lot of productions. And so being able to sort of analyze that a little bit more carefully, as opposed to just going, well, you know, I feel this way or I feel that way. Oh, your feelings are great. You know, those are your feelings. But let's think about it. Let's step it back a little bit and think about what are the practical implications that they were dealing with to solve, as you say, these different problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we let you go, Michael, what's next for you after completing this monumental work?
What's next? So this month, we're recording this here in early to mid-November.
Mm-hmm.
This month, I've got a book due on the Battle of Agincourt. Again, I'm a medieval military historian, kind of by trade. And I had a book come out in July on the Battle of Crécy. Did very well. It's doing very well. And this is kind of a follow-up to it. So it's a popular account of, you know, for anybody, of what happened at Agincourt, like, and what I think really happened, as opposed to, you know, these are the stories of Agincourt. This is the myth of Agincourt. And I'm like, no, sorry. Here's what I think happened, and here's why. I'm always very invested in I don't want to lecture on the end result of my work. I want to bring people into how I got there, into the journey of it.
Show your work.
Show my work. Yeah. Be as completely transparent. Like, and look, if I get something wrong, like, here's my work. Like, show me where it was wrong. Because I don't, as I always say, I don't want to be right. I want to get it right. So
I like that distinction.
I mean, it's what we should all be after. I'm not sure we all are, but you know.
No, there's a strong desire for humanity for a human being to be in the right, to avoid being wrong, right? Like that's
right.
It's a very.
And it leads to all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
So I got the Battle of Agincourt book comes out next year. Again, I got to finish it in a week or 2 weeks, whatever. Not done yet, but it's getting there if my editor's listening. And then a couple of months after that, I'm going to be turning in a book on the battles of Thermopylae. So that's looking at the most famous battle, 480 BC, the Spartans, 300, etc. There were way more than 300 Spartans there.
And that's a mythology that certainly has taken root in certain parts of our American culture.
Oh God, yes. So I go through that. Myself and my co-author Michael would go through that. Like here's the reality, like on the ground, right? You know, reconstructing that from the ground up, but it's really a biography of place. So the book's called The Killing Ground. So we do the Battle of Thermopylae 480. Well, that's like the second of, I forget what our count is of the number of battles that happened there. Like there's a World War II like Nazi tank battle that happens at Thermopylae. And so, you know, just saying like, look, here's this ground, you know, as we say, this may be the bloodiest ground on the planet.
Wow.
Given the number of battles that have happened over time. You know, why do they keep happening here? And, you know, what can we sort of glean from that about, military history, even different succeeding generations of technologies and personnel fighting on the same ground? How do they change it? So got that book to do. And then after that, so that's due in January. After that, I've got a break.
Okay.
So I've been putting out like 3-4 books a year, and man,
that is a pace. That is a pace to be reckoned with. You are the opposite of Tolkien, it seems.
Well, Tolkien was writing like crazy. Let it out.
Right, yeah.
Holding it all back.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to send it to your editor.
Yeah. Well, my editor will be glad to. So yeah, the next book that'll come out will actually be a novel, be the third book of the Seaborn series that comes out. That's fantasy. I think that comes out in the spring. So, but yeah, I'm doing stuff.
You are.
I'm doing stuff.
There's plenty to read from you, no matter what you're looking for. If you're looking for medieval studies, if you're looking for Wheel of Time commentary, if you're looking for fantasy, it sounds like people can find your work on your website, which we'll drop in the description of the podcast. As well as, if you Google Michael Livingston, you will find him. He's there. So
I like your Twitter handle at Medieval Guy.
Yeah, Medieval Guy. Medieval Guy. Yeah, my students, of course, my cadets, right? They find it so like, wow, you're Googleable. Not really the accomplishment you think it is, guys, but yeah, you can Google and find all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much, Michael. This is Dr. Michael Livingston of the Citadel, author of Origins of the Wheel of Time, the legends and mythologies that inspired Robert Jordan. And thank you so much for your time, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Well, John, that was a really cool interview. I re-listened to it myself over the weekend before this, and I forgot how, I don't know, just cool and inspiring.
He's insightful, really.
He's so great, and it's so great to talk to him. I'm really excited. I hope we can talk to him again. We've got to reach out to him, and maybe we'll get him on for some maybe season 2 recap discussions and stuff.
Would love that.
Yeah, it'd be very fun. So we should probably talk about what's going on for the rest of the month. Due to the magic of podcasting, where are we when this comes out? We're at the end.
We are going to be at the end of August. So Ahsoka will have already happened a little bit. Foundation will be getting towards the end of the season, and we'll be right there with you with weekly coverage on both of those, as well as the Wheel of Time. We've got Properly Howard film reviews in full swing. That will have a few episodes out by then, including White Men Can't Jump, Dune Part 1, which we were both on. And soon, I think there will be RoboCop, if I'm placing this publishing correctly.
Exactly. The White Man Can't Jump episode just came out, and I have to say, it was a perfect way to start my Monday when it came out on August 14th. Just pop culture nonsense. Steve and Anthony are just funny together. I think the first 10, 15 minutes, they didn't even talk about White Man Can't Jump. They got into a whole...
It's just fun.
Segue of movie stars, singers who transitioned to movie stars. And that was a really fun conversation. And then I haven't even seen, I can't even remember. I don't even remember if I saw all of White Men Can't Jump, the original film, but they're covering the 2023
I haven't even heard of it.
remake, and I haven't even seen that. I'm not going to bother to see it, but just listening to them talk about film and remakes and what makes a good good remake, and all of that kind of stuff, it was just really super enjoyable. So don't feel like you've got to know the films that they're talking about. It's a hoot.
I have a review here on iTunes, fresh off the presses.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's from February, so it's a little dated. But it says, I discovered this show through other shows, blah, blah, blah. At first, I was scrolling through to listen to reviews about the movies I've seen, but now I find myself listening to all the episodes. You don't have to have seen the movies to enjoy the host takes. Great show. Keep it coming. So, the people have spoken. You know, it's just a great time. We have one other affiliate, though, and that is Elysia. She just wrapped up her coverage of Silo, although I guess just might be a little bit inaccurate now that we are at the end of August. But she is in full swing with Dune. You may have seen on our Firehose feed, if you're on there, you may have seen her preview podcast. We did a cross promo, and she is going through the movies. She's going through the books a little bit, and she's going through the video games. So Dune is something that has always been an enigma to me, and I'm looking forward to her walking me through it because I really need someone to.
I finally just caught up on the preview coverage podcast that Elysia and Luke put out. They went deep on who Frank Herbert was, talking about the wider context of Dune, talking about their coverage plans for all the things. So I think, you could listen to that one podcast and get a sense of what they're going to cover, and there's nothing really spoiled in that one.
I couldn't believe when I found out that Frank Herbert was actually Isaac Asimov with a mustache.
With a big nose and glasses and a wig with little sort of red tufts of hair on sticking out on either side.
Yeah.
So they're going to be covering all kinds of interesting stuff. They're going to just be talking about the culture of Dune because it's such a seminal work and it informs so much other science fiction and fantasy. Again, it was published in 1965 and it really set the stage for a lot of other material. And so they're going to be covering a documentary about a Dune film that never got made. They're going to be talking about the various video games that have been produced. They're going to be talking about the Sci-Fi Channel. I think it was a 10-episode adaptation. They're going to be talking. So it's not just about the books. It's not just a book club thing. She does have in works, a book club on Dune just itself, which will be kind of a companion to her Wool Shift Dust book club, which is running right now. And that's happening on patreon.com/WoolShiftDust. And that's like a pay per episode book club thing. And we've got a special channel set up for her on our Discord as well. So for all of that kind of conversation. The whole idea of her covering this Dune, her and Luke covering all this Dune material is sort of in preparation for part 2 of the Villeneuve film, which is going to be coming. And apparently he's trying to go for a trilogy. So hopefully he'll get greenlit on the 3rd. And
I don't know if anyone's getting greenlit right now, so we'll see.
It's a tough one. So anyway, check out Wool Shift Dust.
Hey, maybe the writer's strike will resolve before this. That
would be fabulous.
Before this airs. If it did, then you can laugh with me.
Gosh. Or head over to our website, lorehounds.com, and you can find all of her episodes there. And of course, jump on the Discord because we've got channels set up just for Elysia and for everything that she's working on. So
Yep. We've always got more coming. If you're confused about why you only see Wheel of Time on your feed, that's because you're on the Wheel of Time feed. And we do have a Firehose feed where you can get all of our stuff. Of course, you will have to go to Alicia's feed for her stuff, for Maester Anthony's feed, his stuff. You can find all 3 of those feeds in the show notes if you're on the Wheel of Time feed. So I will link the Firehose feed on the Wheel of Time feed. If you're on the Firehose feed, you don't need a link to it. Congratulations, you're here. Yeah.
Lots going on.
A lot going on. Going on, but we're here.
And a lot going on because it's being made possible by our Patreon subscribers. So we always like to
segue.
Thank you very much. Do you think we are approaching some sort of professionalism? I don't know.
What a life.
We like to give a shout out to our top tier Lore Master patrons every episode. Samartian, Cyrus, Mark H, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, Nick W, SC, Peter OH, Patina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Lavinia T, Duve 71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Garrett C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Laura G, Deadeye, Jedi, Bob, and Nathan T. Thank you guys all so much for sticking with us for this long and for being such, just great. You guys give us such great vibes. You keep our energy up when we're sort of staring into the abyss of trying to schedule podcasts and edit and record. And when our spouses look at us cross-eyed, what do you mean you're recording again tonight? It's for you guys and for all our patrons and all of our listeners, be it public or, Patreon subscribers. But our lore masters really do help us shore up the finances and keep the lights on over here at Lorehound Central.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for being here, and we will see you for episode 1. The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by the Lorehounds. You can send questions, feedback, and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all our episodes at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions
stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities.